Good evening, everyone. This is Mellissa Thomas with Florida National News coming to you with your evening news rundown for May 31st, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully, you had a great month of May so far. Obviously, things are a little somber now given the recent events and particularly the protests across the country. But we at Florida National News hope that you've had a good weekend so far. Thanks for tuning in. As always, we'd like to bring you the latest COVID-19 reports globally here in the US and in the state of Florida. So starting globally, according to the World Health Organization, we are looking at over 5.9 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, and we are at over 367,000 confirmed deaths. In the US, according to Johns Hopkins University, we're at over 1.7 million confirmed cases, and we're at over 103,000 confirmed deaths. Here in the state of Florida, according to the Florida Department of Health's dashboard, which recently came back online, props to them, we are at over 56,000 confirmed cases, and what you saw, we're just at a little bit over 2,450 confirmed deaths. So that's our latest update where that's concerned. The world story today is that Germany Chancellor Angela Merkel has declined. She's one of a couple of world leaders who has declined President Trump's invitation to the G7 summit, which was originally scheduled to be virtual, but President Trump decided to change it to in person, and it was scheduled to happen at the end of June. But given the current pandemic situation in Germany, Chancellor Merkel said she wouldn't be able to make it. Another world leader who said he would not be able to make it is Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He also mentioned that he's handling the pandemic response in his country as well. However, he did proceed to add that he's still in talks with President Trump and the Trump administration about what they can do in terms of his attendance with the G7 summit. As of the latest news is that it's actually been now pushed to September. President Trump made that announcement on Air Force One yesterday on his way back from watching the SpaceX launch here in Florida. So congrats again to all the team for making that a successful launch. But while he was speaking with the press on Air Force One, he mentioned that he did change the date for the G7 summit to September, and he's again still pushing to include Russia in the conversation, to include Russia as one of the nations as part of what would be the G8 in that case. There are a couple other nations he's considering. A lot of them are already part of the G20, and those nations will be meeting a little later in the year. And so the debate now with his consideration of moving the G7 summit to September is whether or not a lot of these other nations are willing to commit to back-to-back summits so close together, because the meeting that they have with the UN, that's taking place in November. And so folks are not quite sure if the world leaders are going to be willing to commit to to so many meetings so close together. So watch this space. We'll continue to keep you updated. In our other US story, perhaps, maybe, have you possibly thrown away your stimulus money? If you're someone who has not gotten your stimulus money by way of direct deposit, the IRS has instead decided to send out basically bank cards or prepaid Visa cards instead of sending the paper checks that everyone has been expecting. Here's the rub with that. While the IRS didn't make that decision, there are a lot of Americans who are not aware that the cards are coming to them, at least not on a large scale. Now, heading into the future, the IRS and the Treasury Department will plan to allow Americans to choose which means to receive their money, whether by electronic funds transfer, through a card, or by check. But in this case, the Bureau of Fiscal Services chose to go ahead and send the cards out. Now, these cards are issued to 4 million Americans. So some of you may have not received your stimulus payment and wondering where it is. It might have come to you already and you may have thrown it away, but double check your mail, because here's what the IRS is saying to look out for. The card will be coming in a plain envelope, and it will be coming under the name of, what is that name? The Money Network Cardholder Services. Money Network Cardholder Services. Be sure to look for that name on the envelope. And the name that's on the card will not be your name. It will be MetaBank, which is the Treasury Department's financial agency. So, and this was raising a lot of questions for folks who are Visa cardholders, because A, they're their Visa cards are typically with their banks. And for folks who are not Visa card holders, if there's a Visa card coming to them, they're wondering why it's coming to them. So just be on the lookout for that. If you were someone who was waiting on your stimulus funding and was wondering where it is, be sure to double check your mail. And if you take a look at our banner below, the IRS does have a number to call just in case maybe you accidentally threw it away. If you want a way to double check that, there is a 800 number that you can call there to double check. But yeah, that was something that was a bit lost in translation there. So be sure to do your due diligence. Hopefully you already got your stimulus money, but in the event that you haven't yet, there's a way to know for sure. Now, before we get into our Florida news, we do want to give you the audience question for the day. Given that slight communication snafu there, with so few Americans knowing that a card was coming to them, what are your thoughts on the stimulus cards? Do you think this is a better approach than mailing a check? Was this something that you feel would be faster, more effective? And how do you think they could improve the communications with that? Because the other backup to know whether or not the card is in fact a stimulus card is that you should receive a signed letter from President Trump saying that the money is coming to you. But let us know what your thoughts are on that. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you leave one during the commercial break, we'll be happy to share it with the rest of our viewing audience. But for now, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
At Duke Energy, we deliver electricity and so much more, like free home energy assessments, rebates for energy-saving improvements, payment options to help you better manage your budget, and even bill credits for helping the community use less energy. So no matter what you're doing, we can help you make better energy choices every day. It's just another way we bring power to your life. How much can you save?
Welcome back, guys. Thanks for tuning in again. Now, jumping to your first Florida story, the blueprint for reopening Florida college campuses has been approved officially. The Board of Governors for Florida's 12 public universities have announced that they support students coming back to campus in the fall. So that's good news for students that were kind of disgruntled with the virtual learning system. So they'll be able to come back to school in the fall. The Board of Governors recently had a meeting with university presidents to talk about a reopening plan. So what they're doing is they're allowing the college and university presidents to come up with their individual plans for reopening, but they provided certain guidelines for consideration when the individual colleges create their blueprint. So some of the guidelines include that the campus environment has to be healthy, the community environment has to be healthy. And those of you who are in the state of Florida, there's a lot of apartment complexes that surround the colleges. And of course, some of the larger campuses have dorms. So those areas have to be healthy. They have to guarantee that before they can reopen. They have to confirm that they will provide coronavirus testing for the students and staff, contact tracing and surveillance, and academic program delivery. Of course, they have to be ready to be able to unveil their academic programs once the students return to campus, given the 2 to 3 months time here where we've all gone virtual. Things are quite different now. So each university plan must also include how often students and faculty can be tested. So not only confirming that testing will happen, but confirming the testing plan, how often it'll happen, and making sure they have the supplies to do it. The protocols with local hospitals as well on how to handle outbreaks at certain campuses and any hotspots that would appear on the campus, and working with the Florida Department of Health to do contact tracing, of course. Now, the Board of Governors will have an in-person meeting to follow up with all of the individual colleges and universities on June 23rd. So watch this space. We'll continue to give you updates on that. Now, on a more solemn note, Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings has, by way of executive order, reinstated the curfew that was here due to COVID-19. So as of right now, the curfew is effective immediately. So starting tonight from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. Now, the only exceptions are, much like during the quarantine that we had, it's for first responders, folks commuting to work, physicians making emergency calls, folks providing medical services, any local government officials that are doing services already at the time that the curfew begins. However, that's pretty much it. And of course, utility services as well that have to happen in that curfew window. But for everyone else, you have to be off the road. You have to be at home once the curfew hits. The other thing of note is that anyone who is in violation of the curfew will be issued a $500 fine or have to serve up to 60 days in Orange County Jail. So stay off the streets if you can once 10 p.m. hits here in Orange County, Florida. Okay, so wanted to give you guys that update. Additionally, the mayor also released a very lengthy statement on the protests that have been happening with regards to the George Floyd essentially murder. He says, as the first African-American elected mayor of Orange County, I want to acknowledge we have a systemic problem with racism in America. It is my solemn commitment to work with community leaders in addressing it. I support and applaud peaceful and thoughtful protests. However, we cannot, as a civilized society, accept violence and destruction of property as a solution. The call to action for protests must be done in a nonviolent manner with a healthy respect for the rule of law. I stand with law enforcement leaders who have called for change and are against the unjustified use of force. We must be unified and have a respect for one another, especially during this time of a pandemic. As a former police chief and sheriff, lawlessness is not the answer. I will be working with local leaders, clergy, and law enforcement to develop long and short-term strategies to address the myriad of issues facing our society. Now, on that note, we will take another quick commercial break and be back with the remainder of the news stories for the day. Stay tuned.
We wanted to move back home to be closer to his family. We decided to go with pods because things were stressful enough.
We weren't sure how long we were going to need storage for, so we needed something that was flexible, and then they can deliver the container to wherever we move to.
We haven't found the perfect house yet, but we're still looking.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us here at the Evening News Rundown. Now, jumping into your business story, we're going to go over to Las Vegas for a moment. Caesar Entertainment is announcing that 2 of its iconic Las Vegas hotels are set to reopen in June. Now, specifically June 4th, meaning this coming week. So congrats to them for that. Caesar's Palace and Flamingo Las Vegas, those two specific iconic hotels, will reopen for the first time since the Las Vegas Strip closed down due to the pandemic. Casinos have been closed for the last 3 months. So this is a bit of a relief and, of course, a rolling start for that area. Now, there are a couple of other properties in the Caesar Entertainment pipeline that are planning to open a little bit later, including the Link Promenade and the High Roller Observer Wheel. Now, those are gonna be set to reopen next. They expect the Harrah's Las Vegas Hotel and Casino and the gaming floor at the Link Hotel and Casino to reopen next as well. For right now, though, the Caesar Palace and Flamingo, they're actually offering, they're actually limiting the number of seating, obviously to observe the social distancing guidelines, that sort of minimum capacity for indoors. But they are actually offering free parking for those who do go ahead and go there, and they're allowing access to their pools. By all means, swim at your own risk if you're in that area. Again, the gaming areas will be cut in half in terms of where you're allowed to play to allow for social distancing. Now, jumping over to your sports news very quickly, the US Open does have a plan in development so that they can go ahead and get that going. And the plan now is to make sure that it still takes place on its set date in the same location. So the start date would be August 31st as of right now, and the same location, same spot on the calendar. Now, they're in talks, so the US Open this go round will have no spectators, so no fans, fewer on-court officials, and no locker room access during the practice. Again, safety precautions to keep things sanitary and to practice social distancing. Now, U.S. Tennis Chief Executive Stacey Alister, she was saying this is all still fluid and there's no decision that has been made as of yet. So we'll continue to keep you guys updated. This is how the U.S. Open is going to be able to operate during the pandemic if the numbers are still kind of where they are now, if they don't decrease. So now this is a Grand Slam tournament. They want to try to keep as many of those on schedule as possible, especially considering the fact that other tournaments within the Grand Slam have been canceled or postponed. The French Open has been postponed to September, and the Wimbledon has been canceled for the first time since 1945. So they really want to keep the US Open on schedule for this one. Now, jumping to our entertainment story, going back to statements on the protest, Tyler Perry has lent his voice to the debate in terms of protesting versus rioting, and he's saying, stop the violence. Looting, quote, looting is not the answer. He put that in all caps. He mentioned on Facebook, quote, I'm not in Atlanta, but if I were, I would have been standing with our mayor. But there was nothing I could say better than what Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms said last night. Please, please stop this violence. And he was admonishing his followers on Facebook to join peaceful protests, but also to be mindful that, be mindful of the source of the protests that are being organized, be mindful of who the organizers are, whatever those organizations are, because he believes that there are entities that are pretending to be the US and pretending to offer peaceful protests. And then once you arrive there in person, it turns out to be something completely different. But he's admonishing everyone to please be very careful and to do it peacefully, because the looting and rioting is actually counterproductive. As we've heard several key leaders say, that looting is counterproductive. For her part, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms pretty much excoriated the rioters in Atlanta, saying, this is not Atlanta, this is not a peaceful protest, this is chaos. This isn't in the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King. And she was saying when he was assassinated, that's not how Atlanta reacted in reaction to his death. So she's challenging everyone to do things in a peaceful way that's within the rule of law, much like what you heard Orange County Mayor Jerry Deming say in his statement. Now, that does it here for us at the Evening News Rundown. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. If you haven't already, be sure to like us on Facebook. You'll find us there at Florida National News, at FNN News TV, or at FNN News Live. And be sure to subscribe on YouTube. You can find us there at Florida National News, and be sure to click the little bell icon to get all notifications. Okay, so no more programming for tonight. However, tomorrow, be sure to tune back in for the FNN Sports Take with Casey Hudson. They had technical difficulties over this weekend, but she will be back with us on Monday. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Sunday evening.